I'll tell you this. If Stanley had a brother like Roderick, I guarantee he wouldn't survive a whole day.
Welcome to Booktube Hard Mode. What makes it hard mode? I try to talk about books while there's 3 teenagers / preteens in the background, constantly interrupting. We are currently on a family road trip up into the mountains, stealing my husband's cherry sours. We're about halfway through the month of June, and I have currently read 6 books so far this month, and I'm in the process of reading 4 to 12 others. First book I finished this month was A Clash of Kings, A Song of Ice and Fire #2 by George R.R. Martin. I am very, very, very slowly reading this series. It's okay. We're good.
Okay.
It's really good. To me, the second book makes me feel like the way the television series ended kind of makes a little bit of sense. I know nobody likes it, but hey, Bran is a super important character and everybody should be paying attention to him. But I'm sure that, I felt that way after the first book too. So maybe after I finish the other 3, I won't feel that way anymore. We'll see. The next book that I read in the month of June, or that I finished in the month of June, was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I take the time to read books out loud with my husband, and that was one of the books that we read out loud to each other, or took turns reading out loud to each other. Shirley Jackson's prose makes that ridiculously enjoyable. While all of Shirley Jackson's books are kind of labeled as horror, We Have Always Lived in the Castle is not necessarily horror. It's kind of more of a thriller or a mystery, although the mystery in it is very predictable, very easy to see coming. I called it right at the beginning. Did you see it right off the bat? He says probably. It doesn't make it less enjoyable. It's still extremely compelling because what adds all the tension to the story is the way the town treats the girls in this family. Is the tension, it is the horror. It's the horror of humanity, not of what occurred in this family. Really good read. Next book I finished in the month of June was The Rise of Kyoshi, the Kyoshi novels #1 by F.C. Yee. This is a book that I technically finished back in like March or April, but I had a book club meeting coming up that I ended up not being able to make. But at the time I was like, well, I don't have time. I've got to finish this book right now. And so I kind of skim read the whole last part, which made me really sad because I was loving this book so much. And I'm not an Avatar, The Last Airbender fan. My kids have watched it. They're obsessed with it. Me, not so much. I think I've only ever made it through like the first couple of episodes, and then maybe the Kyoshi episode where they go to the island and there's like a cult, is probably not the right word, a group of followers of Kyoshi and a statue. And so I read this book for that book club, and then I skim read the whole last half of it because I was like, I've got to have some context. And then work got so busy I didn't even make it to that book club meeting. Never got back to it up until last week. I just devoured it, and it was just as good as I remembered. Remember when I was skim reading the ending being a little confused, and I thought, okay, well maybe it's just because I'm reading it so fast. I don't know if it's because I lack context for Avatar, or if it is a mystery that is being left open for the next book, which I've already purchased, so I haven't started it yet. I guess we could probably ask the Avatar experts in here. Spoiler warning, skip ahead to whatever time tag I end up putting. Hey guys, as far as you know, is there anything in the Avatar cartoons where somebody who is dead can like come back to life, or their spirit can come back?
And Legend of Korra did show that dead spirits can live in the spiritual world, after death, or in the Avatar's case, can also take over the body of the current Avatar.
Okay, but what if they're not the Avatar?
Yeah, no, there's nothing good for them.
Every sort of bending can theoretically kill someone. With air bending, you can like take all the air out of a person. With water bending, you can take all the water out of a person.
Also blood.
With fire, you can just kill them. It's fire.
That's just dark.
Yeah.
This has been Morbid Ways to Die Through Bending with my children. The next book I finished in the first half of June was The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora. And the thing you have to understand about this book is that The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was one of the first horror books I finished as a child, and I loved with just an unholy passion. Read it in like one of those children illustrated abridged versions, and then went out and found the actual version, and very much looking forward to this book. Found it at my local library. Read through it in a couple of days. I don't sit and just read a book all at once. I have to read about 4 or 5 books at a time. This one took me a little bit longer to get into. Anachronisms, dialogue, the reasons why it has some really poor reviews on Goodreads. Once the story gets going and you realize that it's one kind of giant exposition for the rest of the series, I was much more comfortable with it, and I was like, okay, I can deal with this. Just the way a lot of classic stories, of some of my favorite ones, such as Frankenstein, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Island of Dr. Moreau, are kind of interwoven together, caused me to find a classic piece of horror literature that I've never read before. It's one by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Very enjoyable. If modern dialogue in period pieces throws you off, not the book for you. It's not throughout the whole thing, but there is one specific character who has very modern reactions, and it's done slightly purposefully because of the type of monster that she is. It's a way of her showing her kind of laissez-faire, lack of decorum. It's very enjoyable. I've already checked out the last 2 books in the trilogy. Next up is a book I did read all in one sitting, and that is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. It is an extremely short novella, despite a lot of flaws, including not a single likable character. But it works. You have to not like anybody in the story, otherwise it would just, you wouldn't be able to see them doing what they end up doing by the end of the book. A very modern haunted house story, steeped in Japanese folklore. Loved it. I loved it so much. I mean, I sat there and just read it all in one sitting. Loved the prose. The prose are amazing. Very beautiful, very descriptive. Anytime there's words that I have to look up, I get kind of excited. But then I slowly started to recognize that these adults, these friends, are not friends. All these adults in this book hate each other. Even though they've helped each other through suicide and depression and, you know, some really rough patches in their life. I mean, I've had friendships like that where you have a friend that you just really do not like, or there's something about them that you do not like, but they all get together for what should be an extremely huge, important life event, and they, you know, don't have any family members involved or anything like that, but they have each other involved, despite the fact that all of them have had previous relationships with each other, and none of them seem to currently like each other. Like, do I just not understand adult relationships? Like, I don't know why people would choose to participate in this type of activity together. That was, I think, the only off-putting part. It is kind of a very odd choice until you get to the end, and then you're like, okay, yeah, you have to have some really terrible people to kind of go with what ends up happening at the end of the book. There's a lot of language. It kind of borders on Blair Witch excessiveness. Can they not dig for some other descriptors in their lives? Visceral, almost body horror-esque towards the end, which I'm fine with. I love. Come out of nowhere in a good way, which is one of the things I loved about it. These have to be really horrible people because they don't process things the way a normal person would. I think some people chalk that up to poor writing, kind of looked at it as because it was such a short story. There are a lot of underdeveloped things that I think, had this been a full novel, could have been explored better. I feel like its shortened length is what kept the pace going. I actually gave this book a pretty high rating compared to everybody else on Goodreads. I also love horror.
I just like the horror franchise. Something about it.
Last book that I finished for the halfway point of June is probably the one I have the most to say about. Yeah, Shades of Grey by Jasper Fforde. I have seen so many people describe this book as a science fiction dystopian, when I feel like a better label would actually be an absurdist utopian that slowly reveals itself as dystopian. I mean, you know it's going to show some dark-seated underbelly for how this society is set up. It is so absurd and so hilarious, and it spends almost the entire book slowly peeling away that facade. So in the book Shades of Grey, you have what's called a colortocracy, where society is in a caste system based upon what color your eyes can perceive. Some people can see predominantly red, some people see predominantly blue, some people see predominantly yellow, and then when you have the mixed colors, oranges, greens, purples, they're even, depending upon their levels, they're even higher up in the colortocracy, with purple, of course, being the absolute ruler over them all. And so if you're a purple, you want to keep your control or your hold, and therefore marriages are often arranged, and it's just kind of accepted because you want to move up in the colortocracy by either marrying up to a higher level color or by having children of a, more saturated color of some sort. There are also grays within the society, or people who cannot perceive color or see in monochromatics. The base description of the society sounds extremely depressing, and yet Jasper Fforde's level of absurdism is so hilarious. Thinking about it, I actually probably need to just stop and do a whole separate review. I have so many pages tabbed in that book with quotes and just hilarious portions and thoughts, and it's so amazing. You might be thinking to yourself, Jessica, this book came out like almost a decade ago. Why are you reading it and talking about it now? Well, one, my husband's favorite author, and he's been begging me to read this book, and I finally broke down and read it. Two, Terry Pratchett's one of his big influences, right? So if you love absurdist reading, then Jasper Fforde should probably be at the top of your list. And then three, the prequel/sequel to this book is coming out close to my birthday next year. So I figured it was time to go ahead and read it and get the context. And really, it is a very slow burn. Some people have described it as an entire book of exposition. When you have a complex world, the way this book is, it kind of needs it. But the way it is done with such humor and grace and interesting, quirky people, it's completely worth it. The ending absolutely devastated me. Gives you like a book hangover or ennui afterward because you just don't understand how anything could be that good or amazing or life transforming after you're done reading it, and be so hilarious all at the same time. So what am I reading for the rest of June? Well, we've got My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Like all Grady Hendrix books, I have some thoughts. Final Girl Support Group, also by Grady Hendrix. Currently, my read aloud with my husband is The Haunting of Hill House, another Shirley Jackson book. Woman Eating by Claire Coda. I'm not very far into it, but I'm already loving the allegory in this book with women's relationship with food. The Queen's Counsel, Rebel Rose by Emma Therault. My mother-in-law purchased this book for me and quite a few months ago, and I've been so busy I haven't had a chance to read it, and she just got me the second book in the series. Each book is written by a different author. They're all Disney Hyperion books, kind of historical continuations of the princesses' stories. So this one takes place during or just after the French Revolution. So I figured since she was getting me the second book in the series, I needed to go ahead and get the first one read before I get the second book. Another one of my library books, The Last Quintista, about a girl. Earth is destroyed. She's a part of a small group that gets to go into space to try to help humanity survive. Everybody wakes up from cryogenic type sleep, and she's the only one who can remember her life and family stories and things like that. And I'm really looking forward to reading this book. I'm on the third Song of Ice and Fire book by George R.R. Martin. About 10 to 11% into that book. Like I said, I just read that book kind of in between all my others when I'm feeling like it. I did not bring it on my trip because I knew I had too much to read. The second two books that come after Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. That's the book I'm trying to remember. I actually checked out a lot of books from the library. It'll be really interesting to see if I get that done. Yeah, that's it. That's where we are in the month of June. We got it done.
That's one good thing.